So you know that I like to bring you the best tactics and strategies for hiring your next star employee. And today I want to talk about a topic that frequently comes up with my clients as well as online on social media. And it's around personality assessments and whether or not you should use a personality assessment in your recruitment process. In today's video, I'm going to share my perspectives, some of the pros and cons of using a personality assessment, and overall my recommendation at the end of the video. If you're a subscriber here, I know you follow me for a reason. You know I only give you advice that works. I have done recruitment both with and without personality assessments. And the real question to ask is, do personality assessments help you make better hiring decisions? And if you're not a subscriber here, you know what I'm going to say. Hit the subscribe button below and the bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video, all about building and nurturing your high-performing team. So let's start with the pros of personality assessments. So for starters, number one, they give you a little bit more insight into your candidate beyond what the person is telling you during the interview. Now, you know that I'm a big proponent of assessments in the interview, in the selection process. So interviews have a place, but assessments do too. However, most of the assessments that I talk about are more like technical assessments as opposed to personality assessments. However, a personality assessment can give you a little bit of a glimpse into that candidate sort of profile. Next, depending on the personality assessment itself, you can learn a little bit more about the person's work style. And supposedly, personality assessments, again, depending on which one you're using, can give you some insight into future performance of the candidate. Now, typically when companies use these personality assessments, the way they're designed is that the assessment company will ask you to do sort of a ideal employee profile. And then they're going to give you some of the factors that you need to be looking at that your ideal candidate should demonstrate. So they should be either, like, for example, highly extroverted or highly analytical, or attention to detail is really high, or creativity is really high. So you'll get like a map, an example, if you will, of what your ideal employee should look like based on some of the things that you said in that profile creation process. So based on that, there are a couple of cons with using personality assessments. And the biggest one is that when you compare a personality assessment to like an ideal employee profile, you could be potentially missing out on really good candidates. And I'll give you an example of this with my own sort of personality assessment results. Whenever I have done a personality assessment, I can pretty much say with confidence every single one, and I have done a lot because I'm in HR and this is what we do. Every single one of those personality assessments have told me that my ideal job is in finance or accounting or some kind of numbers driven position. And I am extremely introverted. I am not what you would call a typical HR person. The problem with this is that I would absolutely die if I was in an accounting role for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That is just not my jam at all. I may be good with numbers, I'm good with Excel, I'm high attention to detail, all of that stuff, but I'm not a finance person. And so if an employer were looking at my personality assessment and was using that as a factor on its own to assess whether I would be a success in an HR role or not, it would be 100% false, because I have always been an exceeds expectation performer in all of my HR jobs in the past. So you have to take that ideal profile with a certain grain of salt, because those personality assessments may say one thing, but the person may be may demonstrate certain behaviors and characteristics that actually do make them successful in a role that doesn't fit your ideal profile based on the profile that you build. The other part to that is that in the end, human beings are highly complex creatures. I have yet to come across a personality assessment, and I'll speak for myself, that has accurately pinpointed every single piece of my personality on that assessment. Now, of course, these assessment companies are going to tell you right off the bat, either in the fine print or sometimes even in the big print, that this is not necessarily indicative of the person's full self. And so I find it hard to really take those personality assessments seriously then, because you can't say that this is the personality of the person, but then on the other hand say, well, yeah, but there might be a few things missing, and you should take some of these things and probe a bit deeper to ask the candidate what exactly the deal is with this. It's kind of like a horoscope, right? Everyone has something in common with some of those characteristics that an Aries person has or a Leo person has, but there are also those things that don't match you because you're a human being. You're unique, and you can't pigeonhole yourself into one of 12, different things. And so this is the problem with personality assessments as well, is that if you're using it as a certain, one factor, that's a different story. But you can't use it, and you certainly shouldn't use it as a single determining factor as to whether or not you're going to hire that person in front of you. Secondly, I don't think that you should be using it even as a certain, to sway your decision one way or the other. So here's what I find a lot of employers will do. They will have the interviews, do the assessments, everything, and they're on the fence with a candidate still. The problem with being on the fence is that if you then administer a personality assessment and that personality assessment comes back with some stuff that potentially you think might be a red flag, and you make a decision not to hire that person, that is where the issue comes in. Because if there are things on the personality assessment that come up, it warrants a further conversation. You cannot, or you should not, make a decision any which way, one way or another, based on just that personality assessment report alone. The other con, in my opinion, and again, I've done recruiting using both things, is that sometimes it can create a bias in a manager's head around how to manage that person. So let's just say you ended up hiring the person that you administered this personality assessment to. And in that personality assessment, it gave you certain management techniques and things that usually most assessments will give you, like communication styles and things like that. You cannot, what I find is most managers will simply use that and say, well, this is what the report told me to do, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, without really factoring in that whole uniqueness thing that we talked about just a second ago. That managers won't then have a further conversation to really get to know the person on a one-on-one basis. So if you're comfortable knowing that you're not going to use that personality assessment as a bias or as a preconceived notion of what the person is who you're hiring, then it's fine. But then the question begs, do personality assessments help you make better hiring decisions? And my short answer to that is no. Now, I'm not telling you not to use them. Go ahead and use them. But I find actually sometimes it can deviate from the main purpose of the selection process, is to really understand whether that candidate is going to be a good fit in your organization or not, if they're going to be able to do the job properly or not, and in the way that fits within your culture. A better assessment would be to give them some examples or case studies or some project to work on, a small project. Don't make them spend a week on it, because that's just mean. But something small, or another type of assessment that's truly going to gauge how they perform under pressure, how they use the information that you're giving them to come up with a solution to a problem, what their potentially technique in evaluating the solution and coming up with a solution to the problem. And that, in my opinion, is a way better practical way of assessing whether the candidate is a right fit, because a personality assessment takes into so many factors, like how they're feeling that day or what's going on in their life in that given moment in time. I don't believe it's an accurate representation of the human being. Now I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on personality assessments? This is certainly a very divisive topic. I am simply giving you my perspective, and if you look to me for giving you advice, that is my advice. This is what I tell my clients all the time as well. I want to hear from you though. Have you used personality assessments, and what are your thoughts and feelings around them? Do they help you make better hiring decisions? Comment below and let me know. All right, my friends, that's it for this week. This is Sadaf Sheikh signing out. I have links to 2 videos here, one especially around assessments that I absolutely think you need to watch. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Like this video if you like the information that I shared, and come back next week, same time, same place. I will see you then.